The sun hung high in the clear blue sky, casting a warm glow over the lavish resort. Laughter and splashes filled the air as families gathered around the shimmering pool, the centerpiece of this tropical paradise. Palm trees swayed gently in the breeze, creating a picturesque backdrop for a perfect day of relaxation and fun. Children darted through the water, their joy infectious, while parents lounged on sunbeds, sipping colorful cocktails and enjoying the vibrant atmosphere. Among the families was the Smiths, a loving black family who had eagerly planned this getaway for months. The father, David, had worked tirelessly to provide for his family, and this trip was a well deserved reward. His wife, Lisa, relaxed on a nearby lounge chair, chatting with friends while keeping a watchful eye on their son, Jamal. At just 8 years old, Jamal was a bundle of energy, with a wide smile that could light up the darkest room. Come on, Dad. Let's go. Jamal called out, splashing water in excitement as he waited for David to join him in the pool. David chuckled, shaking his head as he adjusted his sunglasses. All right, I'm coming. He tossed his towel onto a chair and dove into the pool, sending a wave of water over Jamal. The boy squealed with delight, splashing back at his father, and together they swam and played, creating cherished memories amidst the laughter of other families. However, the joyous atmosphere was about to be disrupted. A woman in her 40s, with sharp features and an air of entitlement, sat on a sun nearby, her eyes narrowing as she observed the scene. Her name was Karen, and she had a reputation for making her opinions known, especially when it came to matters she deemed appropriate. Today, she had set her sights on the Smiths. What do you think you're doing? Karen's voice cut through the laughter, sharp and accusatory. David and Jamal paused, the playful splashes momentarily silenced as they turned to face her. Excuse me, David replied, a mix of confusion and concern in his tone. That boy doesn't belong here, she declared, pointing at Jamal with disdain. This pool is for families like mine, not for, well, people like him. The laughter around the pool faltered, and a hush fell over the crowd. Jamal's face fell, confusion and hurt flashing in his eyes. David felt his heart race, the protective instincts surging through him as he stepped forward. Ma'am, he is my son, David said firmly, maintaining his composure. We have every right to be here just like anyone else. Karen scoffed, crossing her arms as she leaned back. Not in my world. You need to get him out of this pool before he scares off the other guests. The tension escalated as onlookers exchanged glances, some in disbelief, others whispering amongst themselves. Jamal looked up at his father, searching for reassurance. David knelt beside him, placing a reassuring hand on his shoulder. Don't listen to her, buddy. You belong here, just as much as anyone else. But Dad, why does she hate me? Jamal asked, his voice trembling. David took a deep breath, wishing he could shield his son from the harsh realities of the world. Some people have a hard time understanding that love and kindness come in all colors. You are perfect just the way you are, Jamal. Karen's eyes narrowed further, her determination unwavering. I'll be calling management, she threatened, her voice dripping with malice. This is unacceptable. As she stormed off toward the resort's main building, murmurs erupted among the other guests. David stood tall, a mix of anger and sadness swirling inside him. The sun, once a symbol of warmth and joy, now felt harsh against his skin. Dad, why did she say those things? Jamal asked, his innocence tugging at David's heartstrings. It's not your fault, son. Some people just don't understand. But we're going to stand together, okay? David replied, determination flooding his voice. Jamal nodded, but the hurt lingered in his eyes. David knew this moment would leave a mark, not just on Jamal, but on their family. The blissful day they had envisioned had taken a dark turn, and as David glanced around at the other guests, he realized they had a choice to make. Would they support his family or remain silent? As he held Jamal close, David made a silent vow. He would not let hate win today. They would fight for their place in this resort, in this community, and for the values of love and acceptance that they held dear. Little did he know, this was just the beginning of a confrontation that would ripple through the resort and challenge the hearts and minds of those who witnessed it. David Smith leaned back against the cool tiles of the poolside, his heart still racing from the confrontation. Jamal splashed around nearby, trying to shake off the encounter, but David knew that the incident would stick with him. To understand how they ended up in this situation, it was essential to delve into the journey that had brought them here, a tale of dreams, perseverance, and the fight for dignity. Born and raised in a modest neighborhood, David had seen both the beauty and the struggles of life. His mother, a single parent, worked long hours as a nurse, instilling in him the values of hard work and resilience. You can achieve anything if you put your mind to it, she often reminded him, wiping her hands on her scrubs after a long shift. With those words ringing in his ears, David dedicated himself to the studies, aiming for a better life. He excelled in school, driven by the desire to lift his family out of their financial struggles. After high school, he secured a scholarship to a prestigious university, where he pursued a degree in hospitality management. The experience opened doors for him, but it also exposed him to the stark realities of a world where race could play a role in opportunities. David often found himself in rooms where he was one of the few people of color, and while some welcomed him, others were indifferent, even dismissive. After graduating, David worked his way up in the hospitality industry, gaining invaluable experience and making connections. His passion for creating welcoming spaces for families fueled his ambition. With savings from years of hard work, he took a leap of faith and invested in a rundown resort on the outskirts of town. It was a gamble, but David saw potential where others saw problems. The resort, once a shadow of its former glory, transformed into a vibrant destination under his care. But the journey wasn't without its challenges. David faced skepticism from investors and staff who doubted his vision. He often found himself confronting racist attitudes, both overt and subtle. Each encounter only strengthened his resolve to create a space that celebrated diversity and inclusivity. He wanted every guest, regardless of their background, to feel welcome and valued. As the resort flourished, David poured his heart into making it a sanctuary for families. He implemented programs that celebrated cultural diversity and hired staff from various backgrounds, ensuring everyone had a place in his vision. Jamal, born a few years after the resort's revival, grew up surrounded by laughter, joy, and a sense of belonging. For David, being a father was just as rewarding as being a business owner. He often brought Jamal to the resort, sharing with him the importance of community and kindness. "Look around, Jamal," David would say as they walked through the resort together. "This is our home, a place where everyone should feel safe and welcome, no matter what they look like or where they come from." Jamal soaked in his father's wisdom, understanding the value of friendship and acceptance at a young age. He made friends with kids from different backgrounds, learning about their cultures and sharing his own. Together, they built a diverse community of play and laughter, embodying the values David held dear. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, painting the horizon with hues of orange and pink, David reflected on the day's events. The confrontation with Karen wasn't just an isolated incident, it was a reminder of the prejudice that still existed, even in a place he had worked so hard to build. His mind drifted back to his childhood, where he had encountered racism firsthand. David remembered the day he and his friends were kicked off a playground by a group of kids who didn't want to share. The pain of exclusion still stung, and he vowed never to let his son experience such heartache. That memory fueled his desire to create a different environment, a haven where families could enjoy themselves without fear of judgment. "Dad," Jamal called, breaking David's reverie. He swam up to the edge of the pool, water dripping from his hair. "Can we get ice cream, please?" David smiled, happy to see his son's spirit undampened. "Sure, buddy. Let's get you some ice cream." As they walked toward the poolside cafe, David noticed the whispers from other guests. Some cast sympathetic glances, while others appeared disinterested. "Just ignore them, son," David said gently, kneeling down to meet Jamal's eyes. "Remember, we're here to enjoy our time together." Jamal nodded, but the shadow of the earlier incident lingered. The world wasn't as simple as they had hoped, and David felt the weight of that truth. Their joyful day had turned into a lesson in resilience, one that he hoped would teach his son about the importance of standing up for oneself and others. As they approached the cafe, David felt a surge of determination. This incident wouldn't define them or their resort. He would confront Karen and make it clear that his family belonged there, and that hate would not be tolerated. That evening, David gathered the staff to discuss the incident and the importance of creating an inclusive environment. He spoke passionately, emphasizing the resort's core values and the need to support every guest. The team rallied around him, ready to stand together against prejudice. As the stars began to twinkle in the night sky, David felt a renewed sense of purpose. He knew that this battle was far from over, but with his family by his side and a supportive community, they would face whatever challenges lay ahead. The journey they had undertaken was about more than just a resort. It was about building a legacy of acceptance, love, and understanding that would extend far beyond the poolside. The next morning dawned bright and clear, but a lingering tension hung in the air of the resort. As the sun rose over the horizon, painting the sky in soft shades of pink and gold, David awoke with a sense of purpose. He could feel the heaviness from the previous day's incident weighing on him, and he knew he had to address it head on. After a quick breakfast, David decided it was time to talk to Karen. He wanted to understand her motivations and make it clear that her behavior was unacceptable. He dressed carefully, opting for a crisp white shirt and comfortable pants, hoping to convey professionalism and calmness. As he made his way to the pool, he could see families enjoying their morning, laughter and splashes echoing around him. He found Jamal building a sandcastle near the pool's edge, his little hands skillfully sculpting towers and moats. The sight warmed David's heart, reminding him of the innocent joy of childhood, untouched by the harsh realities of the world. He approached Jamal and knelt beside him. "Hey, champ, how's the castle coming along?" David asked, ruffling his son's hair. "Look, Dad, it's the biggest one yet." Jamal beamed, proudly showing off his creation. "It's awesome. You're a real architect," David replied, sharing in his son's excitement. But as they spoke, his thoughts returned to Karen. He needed to confront her for Jamal's sake, to show him the importance of standing up for oneself and the values they cherished. "Stay here for a bit. I'll be right back," David said, trying to sound casual but feeling the weight of his resolve. He walked toward the pool area, scanning for Karen. She was seated at a table, her demeanor as icy as the morning breeze. With determination in his heart, David approached her, the other guests watching with interest. "Karen," he said, his voice steady, "can we talk?" She looked up, her expression hardening as she recognized him. "What do you want?" she snapped, crossing her arms defensively. "I wanted to discuss yesterday's incident," David replied, maintaining eye contact. "What you said to my son was hurtful and unacceptable. We all deserve to be treated with respect." Karen rolled her eyes, her tone dismissive. "Respect is earned, not given. Your son doesn't belong in this environment. This is a family resort for people like me." "People like you?" David asked, struggling to keep his composure. "What does that even mean?" "Because my son has a different skin color. He deserves to be here just as much as you do." Other guests began to gather, their expressions a mix of curiosity and concern. David could sense the tension rising, but he pressed on. "My son is a wonderful kid who has friends from all backgrounds. He deserves to feel safe and welcome, especially in a place that promotes family values." Karen's face flushed and her voice grew louder. "You don't get it. This is how things are. People like you ruin everything." The crowd murmured in disbelief, and Jamal, who had been watching from a distance, felt a knot form in his stomach. He could see his father standing tall, but he also sensed the hurt and anger in his voice. David took a deep breath, trying to rein in his emotions. "Listen, Karen," he said, his voice firm but calm. "I understand that you might have some beliefs about how things should be, but they have no place here. This resort is built on inclusivity and respect for everyone. I won't let you dictate who belongs here." "I'll speak to the management," Karen hissed, her lips curling into a sneer. You'll regret this. Go ahead, David challenged, his heart racing. But I'll be standing right here, waiting to explain to them why we won't tolerate hate. As the tension reached its peak, a few guests stepped forward in support of David. You're absolutely right, one woman said, nodding firmly. This is a place for everyone, and we should stand together against discrimination. The tide was turning, and David could feel the shift in the atmosphere. Jamal watched from afar, his heart swelling with pride for his father, but also confusion about the harshness of the world. You think you can just come here and push us around? Karen spat, glaring at the small gathering forming around David. You don't belong here either. A man stepped forward, anger flashing in his eyes. And you do? You're the one causing trouble. Why should we allow your hatred to ruin our vacation? Karen's bravado faltered slightly, and David seized the opportunity. We're not here to fight, he said, his voice steady, but we are here to support each other. This resort should be a place where families can come together, regardless of their backgrounds. Exactly, another voice chimed in. We're all here to relax and have a good time. Nobody should be excluded because of their skin color. With the crowd rallying behind him, David felt a renewed sense of strength. He turned back to Karen, his expression softening slightly. Look, I understand that you might have your beliefs, but you need to recognize that they're harmful. We're all humans trying to enjoy our lives. Can we not work together to make this a better place for everyone? Karen glared at him, her facade cracking. You think you can change my mind? I've been like this my whole life. I don't expect to change your mind overnight, David replied, his voice calm but firm. But I hope you can start to see that love and kindness are more powerful than hate, for your own sake and for the sake of those around you. As the confrontation continued, Jamal finally stepped forward, his small frame trembling slightly. Mom, Dad, can we just go? He asked, his voice small but filled with a courage that surprised David. I don't want to fight. David knelt down to his son's level, his heart aching at the sight of Jamal's disappointment. I understand, buddy, he said gently. But this is about standing up for ourselves and others. It's important that you see this, even if it's hard. Karen scoffed, throwing her hands up in exasperation. See, even he knows this is ridiculous. You're making a scene over nothing. David felt a surge of anger but took a deep breath. No, Karen, it's about acknowledging that people can feel unsafe and unwelcome. It's about being better as a community. Suddenly, a familiar face emerged from the crowd. It was Lisa, David's wife, having heard the commotion and rushing over. What's going on here? She asked, concern etched on her face. Karen was just trying to ban Jamal from the pool, David explained, his voice steady despite the chaos around them. Lisa's expression darkened as she processed the situation. That's unacceptable, she said firmly, stepping beside David. We're raising our son to be proud of who he is. You can't dictate who belongs here. Karen's confidence began to wane, and she glanced around at the growing crowd, realizing she was losing support. This isn't over, she spat, backing away. I'll be speaking to the management, and you'll all regret this. As she turned to storm off, David felt a mixture of relief and triumph. The crowd began to disperse, murmuring in support of him and his family. Thank you all for standing with us, David said, looking at the guests who had backed him up. We need to remember that we're all in this together. Let's create a space where everyone feels safe. Jamal looked up at his father, his eyes wide with admiration. Did we win, Dad? He asked, a hint of uncertainty in his voice. We stood up for what's right, and that's a victory, David replied, pulling Jamal into a hug. Always remember that. As they embraced, Lisa smiled, pride shining in her eyes. They had faced adversity together, and their bond grew stronger through the experience. The confrontation had opened a dialogue about race, acceptance, and community, a conversation that would continue well beyond that day. As the sun climbed higher, David and his family decided to enjoy the rest of the day by the pool. They splashed around, laughter echoing as they let the stress of the morning fade away. The day was filled with joy and a renewed sense of purpose, and as they spent time together, David knew they would overcome any challenges ahead. The resort, once a peaceful getaway, had become a battleground for love and acceptance. And while the confrontation was only the beginning, David felt hopeful. They would keep fighting for a world where kindness triumphed over hate, ensuring that Jamal would grow up in an environment that celebrated diversity and community. The battle against prejudice was far from over, but they were ready to face it together, one day at a time. As the sun set over the horizon, casting a warm orange glow across the resort, the tension from the earlier confrontation hung heavily in the air. Families continued to enjoy their vacations, but whispers of the incident between David and Karen rippled through the crowd like an unwelcome chill. The pool area that had once felt like a sanctuary now seemed charged with uncertainty. That evening, David sat at the edge of the pool, his feet submerged in the cool water while Jamal played nearby with other children. Lissa joined him, resting her head on his shoulder. "What a day," she sighed, her voice laced with exhaustion. "Yeah, it was intense," David replied, watching Jamal splash and laugh, trying to maintain a sense of normalcy amidst the chaos. "I just hope the other guests support us and understand what we're fighting for." Lissa nodded, her brow furrowing. "I saw some guests whispering about the incident. It worries me that it might cause a rift in the community." "Let's not jump to conclusions just yet," David said, trying to reassure her. "The support we received earlier was encouraging. But I agree, we need to keep the lines of communication open." As night fell, the resort hosted a gathering at the outdoor dining area, featuring music and food stalls. The atmosphere was lively, but there was an underlying tension among some guests. David knew that they needed to address the incident, not just for their family, but for the sake of the entire resort community. "We should hold a meeting," David suggested, turning to Lisa. "Invite the guests and staff to talk about inclusivity and the values we want this resort to represent." "I think that's a great idea," Lisa replied, her eyes sparkling with determination. "Let's do it tomorrow. We need to create a safe space for everyone." The following morning, David and Lisa worked tirelessly to prepare for the meeting. They designed flyers to distribute around the resort, encouraging guests to come and share their thoughts on fostering a welcoming community. The couple was anxious, knowing that some guests might resist the conversation, but they were determined to make their voices heard. As the sun rose, casting golden rays across the palm trees, the atmosphere buzzed with anticipation. The meeting was scheduled for the early afternoon, and guests were beginning to gather in the main conference room. David stood at the front, his heart racing as he scanned the room, seeing a mix of familiar faces and newcomers. "Thank you all for coming," he began, his voice steady yet filled with emotion. "As many of you know, our family experienced a troubling incident at the pool the other day. We believe it's essential to address it openly and honestly so we can work together to ensure that our resort remains a safe and welcoming space for everyone." Murmurs rippled through the audience, some nodding in agreement while others exchanged glances filled with uncertainty. David noticed Karen sitting in the back, her arms crossed tightly, a scowl etched on her face. "Racism and prejudice have no place here," David continued, gathering his thoughts. "We need to stand together as a community and show that we reject hatred in all its forms. It's not just about my family. It's about creating an environment where everyone feels valued and respected." As David spoke, he could see a mix of reactions. Some guests appeared supportive, while others seemed defensive. He took a deep breath, prepared to face any backlash. "Does anyone want to share their thoughts?" David asked, scanning the room. A woman in her 30s stood up, her voice shaking slightly. "I think it's great that you're bringing this up. My family has always felt welcome here, but I've heard whispers about the incident, and it concerns me. We need to make it clear that discrimination won't be tolerated." "Exactly," chimed in a man sitting in the front row. "We should celebrate our differences, not shy away from them. The world is changing, and we need to change with it." As the discussion progressed, David felt a glimmer of hope. Guests shared personal stories of discrimination and experiences that echoed the sentiments of his family. The atmosphere shifted from tension to solidarity, and it became clear that many guests were eager for a change. However, not everyone was on board. Karen finally stood, her face flushed with anger. This is ridiculous. You're turning this place into a political battleground. I came here to relax, not to listen to your complaints about racism. A murmur of discontent rippled through the crowd. David maintained his composure, knowing that he had to address her head on. Karen, this isn't about complaints. It's about making sure that everyone can enjoy their time here without fear of judgment or hostility. We're advocating for a safe space for our children to play and grow. Karen scoffed, her arms crossed tighter. So now you think you can dictate how everyone should feel? What about my feelings? I don't want to be around people I don't agree with. That's the beauty of community, David replied, his voice unwavering. It's about finding common ground and respecting each other's differences. It's not about forcing anyone to change their beliefs, but about understanding that we can coexist peacefully. The tension in the room escalated, but several guests rallied around David. We can't allow hate to dictate our experiences here, one woman said. We're all here for a good time. Let's not ruin that with negativity. Gradually, more voices joined in support of David's vision, emphasizing the importance of love and acceptance. The atmosphere began to shift back toward unity, but Karen remained defiant, her face reddening with frustration. I'll be contacting management, she declared, her voice trembling with rage. This resort is going downhill fast with these kinds of discussions. Maybe that's what we need, David responded calmly, sensing the room's growing support. If management doesn't agree with inclusivity, then perhaps they need to reconsider what kind of environment they want to foster. Karen huffed and stormed out of the room, leaving behind a mixture of relief and concern. The remaining guests began to relax, and David felt a wave of support wash over him. The meeting continued, with guests discussing ways to promote inclusivity within the resort. Ideas flowed freely, from creating events celebrating different cultures to implementing training programs for staff on diversity and acceptance. David felt invigorated by the collective energy in the room, and he realized that they were not just fighting against hate. They were building a community grounded in understanding and compassion. As the meeting wrapped up, David stood at the front, gratitude filling his heart. Thank you all for being here and for your commitment to creating a safe space. Let's work together to ensure that everyone feels welcome and celebrated. As the crowd dispersed, David felt a sense of accomplishment. They had taken the first step toward creating a community united against hate. Lisa joined him, her eyes sparkling with pride. You did it, David. You brought people together. I couldn't have done it without everyone's support, he replied, smiling at the attendees as they filtered out of the room. We have a long way to go, but I believe we're on the right path. That evening, David and his family gathered by the pool for dinner, enjoying the sounds of laughter and conversation around them. The air felt lighter, infused with hope and determination. As they sat together, David realized that they were not just advocating for themselves. They were paving the way for a better future for everyone at the resort. But as the sun dipped below the horizon, David couldn't shake the feeling of unease. Karen's anger lingered, and he knew that she wouldn't let the issue rest. Later that night, David and Lisa talked about the day's events. Do you think we did enough? Lisa asked, her brow furrowed with concern. We started a conversation, and that's the most important part, David replied. We can't change minds overnight, but we can plant seeds of understanding. I just hope Karen doesn't escalate things further. The next morning, the resort buzzed with anticipation as guests discussed the meeting. David and Lisa were encouraged to hear that most of the feedback was positive. The sense of community was growing stronger, and people were eager to participate in the planned cultural events. However, trouble was brewing behind the scenes. Karen wasted no time in rallying support from those who shared her beliefs. She spoke to anyone who would listen, painting David and his family as troublemakers trying to disrupt the resort's peace. Her narrative quickly gained traction among a small but vocal group of guests who felt similarly. By the time the weekend arrived, tensions boiled over. David and Lisa overheard snippets of conversation at the pool. They're trying to turn this place into a social experiment, one man said. I just want to enjoy my vacation without all this nonsense. David felt a knot tighten in his stomach. The discussions he had hoped would bring unity were now creating a divide. That evening, he decided to address the growing rift. He gathered the staff and a few key guests, urging them to remain committed to promoting inclusivity. We can't let the actions of one person define who we are, David said passionately. This resort represents love and acceptance. We need to stand firm in our values. As the group dispersed, David felt a renewed sense of purpose. He understood that this fight would not be easy, but with the support of the community, he was determined to see it through. As the night wore on, he couldn't shake the feeling that the confrontation with Karen was far from over. But for now, he focused on the support and camaraderie around him, reminding himself that they were not alone in this battle. Together, they would rise above hate and continue to build a community that embraced diversity and understanding. The next day, as families gathered by the pool, David made a point to engage with guests, sharing stories and encouraging open dialogue. Slowly, he felt the atmosphere shifting back toward positivity. But lurking in the shadows, Karen was scheming. As the sun began to set again, the resort was buzzing with excitement for the weekend events, but David felt a storm brewing. He knew that they had made progress, but the battle was far from won. The community was divided, but David held on to hope. He would fight for a future where love triumphed over hate, where families could enjoy their time together without fear of discrimination. They would not back down. They would continue to rise together, united in their values and commitment to change. The sun shone brightly on the day of the community barbecue, casting a golden hue over the resort's expansive lawn. David and Lisa had worked tirelessly to prepare for the event, hoping it would serve as a celebration of unity and inclusivity. Families gathered, excited to share food, stories, and laughter, while children ran freely, their giggles echoing through the air. As David set up tables adorned with colorful tablecloths and platters of grilled meats and fresh salads, he couldn't shake the feeling of anticipation and anxiety that buzzed beneath the surface. The previous weeks had been a whirlwind of discussions, emotions, and unexpected confrontations, and while they had made progress, he knew Karen's lingering presence could stir tension at any moment. Lisa approached him, her arms laden with plates and utensils. "Everything looks amazing, David. I think we're ready," she said, her smile brightening his spirits. "Let's make this a day to remember." "Absolutely," he replied, grateful for her unwavering support. "Let's focus on the positive today. This is our chance to show that love can conquer hate." As guests arrived, David welcomed them with open arms. Familiar faces mingled with newcomers, and the atmosphere buzzed with energy. He saw Jamal playing with other kids, laughter erupting as they splashed each other in the nearby pool. David's heart swelled with pride, seeing his son enjoying himself, surrounded by friends and the carefree joy of childhood. "Hey, Dad, look at me," Jamal called, performing a cannonball into the pool, sending a cascade of water into the air. David cheered, and for a moment, he allowed himself to forget the tensions that had plagued them. This was what family and community were all about. However, as the barbecue progressed, David noticed Karen approaching with a group of guests who had supported her in the past. His stomach tightened at the sight, but he reminded himself of the progress they had made. Today was about unity. "David," Karen called, her tone sharp yet composed as she reached him. "I see you've put a lot of effort into this event." "Thank you, Karen. We wanted to create a space for everyone to come together and enjoy themselves," David replied, trying to keep his voice neutral. "Well, I appreciate that, but I still believe that my concerns were valid," she said, her expression defiant. "Not everyone here agrees with this idea of inclusivity." David felt his patience waning, but he took a deep breath, reminding himself of the importance of dialogue. "I understand that you have concerns, but this event is meant to show that we can coexist. It's about understanding and acceptance, even if we don't always see eye to eye." "Acceptance is earned, David. You can't force people to accept something they're uncomfortable with," Karen countered, her voice rising slightly. Before David could respond, another guest chimed in, a supportive ally from the recent meeting. "But isn't it worth trying? We all want the same thing, to enjoy this community and make it a welcoming place for everyone. The conversation began to draw attention, and more guests turned to listen. David saw an opportunity to foster understanding. I believe that acceptance starts with open conversations, he said, addressing the crowd. We're all here because we care about our families and this community. Let's share our thoughts respectfully. The guests began to speak up, sharing their own stories of feeling excluded or marginalized. One woman recounted her experience as a person of color who often felt unwelcome in spaces dominated by others. Another man shared how he had faced discrimination due to his immigrant background. Each story added layers to the discussion, allowing the community to connect on a deeper level. As the conversation unfolded, David watched Karen's expression shift. He could see her resolve begin to waver, if only slightly. It was as if she was processing the realization that her views were not universally accepted. For the first time, she seemed uncertain. We're not asking you to abandon your beliefs, Karen, David continued, his voice steady but kind. We're asking for understanding. We can create a space where everyone feels valued, and that starts with listening to one another. Jamal approached, holding a plate of food with a wide grin on his face. Dad, can we play a game after we eat? Everyone is having so much fun. Of course, buddy. Just let me finish this conversation, David replied, ruffling Jamal's hair affectionately. The boy's enthusiasm was infectious, and it reminded David of the joy they were fighting for. As the barbecue continued, the atmosphere shifted from tense to more relaxed. Guests mingled, laughter punctuated the air, and children splashed in the pool, a testament to the unity they were striving to achieve. Karen, still standing on the periphery, seemed to soften as she watched the families interact. Do you really think we can change people's minds? She finally asked, her voice quieter now. David turned to her, sensing a crack in her armor. It's not about changing minds, Karen. It's about opening hearts. When we come together as a community, we have the power to change how we view each other. It's a journey, not a destination. A moment of silence hung between them as Karen considered his words. David hoped that somewhere in her heart she was beginning to understand the impact of her actions. After the meal, David organized games for the kids, creating an opportunity for families to bond. He watched as Jamal joined a group of children, their laughter echoing as they played tag. The scene was a beautiful reflection of the community he had envisioned, a space where every child felt safe and included. As the sun began to set, casting a warm glow over the resort, David took a moment to gather his thoughts. He felt grateful for the progress they had made, yet aware that challenges still lay ahead. Hey, David, Lissa called, waving him over to a group of guests who had gathered for a photo. Come join us. David smiled, walking over to join his family. As they posed together, he felt a sense of belonging wash over him. This was what he had fought for, the joy of being surrounded by loved ones and the knowledge that they were making a difference. Later that evening, as families began to pack up and head home, David stood with Lisa, watching the sunset. The sky was a canvas of vibrant colors, a beautiful representation of the unity they had fostered throughout the day. You did an amazing job today, Lisa said, leaning against him. I think we really made an impact. Thanks, love. It wasn't easy, but I feel like we're moving in the right direction, David replied, his heart full. I just hope we can keep this momentum going. As the last guests left, David felt a sense of hope and determination swell within him. The journey toward inclusivity was ongoing, but together they could create a better future for their community. In the days following the barbecue, the resort buzzed with renewed energy. Guests who had previously remained silent began to engage in conversations about inclusivity, sharing their experiences and fostering connections. The divide that had once threatened to tear the community apart seemed to be mending. David felt a renewed sense of purpose, knowing that they had turned a corner. The conversations continued, and he and Lisa remained committed to ensuring that everyone felt welcome at the resort. They implemented new programs focused on diversity, offering workshops and events that celebrated various cultures and backgrounds. As summer rolled on, the resort transformed into a vibrant hub of activity, welcoming families from all walks of life. David watched with pride as Jamal thrived in this environment, surrounded by friends who were different yet similar in their love for fun and adventure. One evening, while hosting a cultural night featuring cuisine and music from around the world, David felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. The resort had become a beacon of hope and acceptance, and he knew they had built something truly special. As the sun set on another beautiful day, David gathered his family around him. "I want you both to know how proud I am of you," he said, looking at Lisa and Jamal. "Together, we've created a place where everyone belongs. This is what community is all about." Jamal grinned, his eyes shining with excitement. "I love it here, Dad. Everyone gets to have fun." "And that's how it should be," David replied, wrapping his arms around them. "Let's keep fighting for love and acceptance, no matter what challenges come our way." In that moment, as they stood together, David felt a renewed sense of hope for the future. The story of the resort was one of resilience and community, of standing up for what was right. And while the journey was ongoing, he knew that they were making a difference. One moment, one conversation, and one act of kindness at a time. As the stars twinkled above, David looked out at the horizon, ready to face whatever came next. The love they had built, the connections they had forged, and the sense of belonging they had created were worth every struggle. In that, he found peace. And with that, the chapter of their story drew to a close, but the legacy of acceptance and love would continue to flourish for generations to come. Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more content that explores important stories and discussions like this one, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us create more engaging content and fosters a community where we can all learn and grow together. Don't forget to hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. We appreciate your feedback, so let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Together, let's keep the conversation going.